Hello, this is Jerry DiPiano. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for FemmePharma Consumer Healthcare. Welcome to our Facebook Live broadcast with author Bill Mitchell of When Dating Hertz. Obviously, this is a very serious topic, and you're probably wondering, what is the CEO of a women's healthcare company doing, having a conversation about dating violence, and violence against women? Well, as the name of our company would suggest, FemmePharma is a women's healthcare company. And our mission is broader than just product-oriented. We are encouraging women to pay attention to their safety and their health. And we also believe in empowering them with knowledge. We brought Bill Mitchell here tonight to discuss a very serious topic that impacts the safety of women, and especially younger women. And it's the issue of dating violence. I met Bill a number of years ago when he and I served on the board of the Cleary organization, which is a national organization that looks after the safety of young people on college campuses. And I'm proud to say that Bill Mitchell became my friend. But then I learned about his story, the story of his beautiful daughter, Kristin Mitchell, who was attacked and murdered by her boyfriend. And I thought it very important to have him with us this evening so that he can share more about Kristin and about dating violence and what you can do to protect yourself. Bill, it's lovely to have you here this evening.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad that you and your organization put this together tonight, and I'm really looking forward to having a good discussion with you and some of our viewers. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Bill, please tell us about your lovely daughter, Kristin.
I'd love to. What I thought I would do, Jerry Ann, is maybe go to just really 4 slides and just kind of give you a sense of who she is. And so here we go. So here we are, Jerry Ann and I, and you mentioned the book that I put out. It came out in May of last year. But here's some pictures of Kristin now. The one, she lived to be 21. She graduated from St. Joseph's University outside of Philadelphia. The picture in the middle is, of course, graduation day, and she was super. I'll talk a little more about her once we get through the slides, so I don't want to put it all here. But on the left, you see a picture that is my son, David. You see Kristin, you see Michelle, you see me. And we're so happy. I mean, she had a job lined up at General Mills. She was a college graduate. She was all set. One of the great ironies about that picture, one of the last pictures ever taken of us as a foursome was actually taken by the boyfriend, who 20 days after that murdered her. So it's so ironic. On the right, of course, Michelle and Kristin, and it was just a great day. It was the last day that our family saw her alive. Just some pictures to give you a sense of who she was, but she was a fun person. This is a picture taken in her college dorm on the left, and this other one is senior prom from high school. And so is the one to the right of that, where you see her beautiful hair. She was very attractive. She was very, very sweet. The picture on the right was on her 21st birthday. That was about 10 months before she was killed. But we went out to eat that night. We took that picture, and then unfortunately, 20 days after she graduated, and we're going to talk more about this, but 20 days after she graduated, she was killed by this man. So the picture in the upper left is pretty obvious. This is now after the funeral mass, and this is at the graveyard. And the picture in the middle there at the top is a cameo that's on her gravestone. I just want to point out, if I could, that if you look in the flowers, I don't mention this in the book, I don't think, but if you look in the flowers, you'll actually see my picture, my son David, and you see Kristin. We're with Kristin. Upper right is the day the gravestone arrived. Bottom left, we had something called Kristin's Crusade. It was a nonprofit for over a decade. And then a picture on the right, there's an article that was being done about me. And one of the shots was me standing at her grave there. These pictures, these were taken, as the date indicates, June 2nd. So really, these were 3 to 4 hours before she was killed. And back in those days, when people took selfies, they didn't actually call them selfies yet. That term hadn't been used, but she snapped these pictures. She was with a friend at the time. And so then I photoshopped them all together. And from a parent's standpoint, knowing what happened 3 or 4 hours later, at least you say, well, at least 3 or 4 hours before this happened to her, she was a bright, happy, attractive, wonderful, sweet girl. So really, those are the slides I just wanted to share with you. And if we can go back to the other screen and come off of screen share.
Bill, thank you so much for sharing those pictures of Kristin and of your family. I did learn about this a number of years ago, and I must say that it took my breath away then, and it continues to take my breath away. As a parent, it's the most horrific thing you can ever imagine, to lose a child, much less to lose them in the way that you lost your daughter. I know this is very painful, but please share the sequence of events leading up to the attack and murder of your daughter.
Yes, so I will do that in just a second. I want to do that. Just to sort of go with the pictures that you saw a minute ago, but Kristin was a very special person. She wasn't just those pictures that you just saw. And I'm not just saying this because she was my daughter, but she is a real bright spot even now in people's lives. And I say that in the present, she still is. Not that she was, she still is. I mean, everybody just loved her, and they still do. And she loved her family and friends. She'd do anything for her family and friends. Very loyal person. She was also quite spiritual, and that was always something I thought was very striking. And she really, we're a reasonably religious family here at this house, but on her own, she was really very spiritual and always looked for deeper meanings in things. And besides all of that, very creative, liked to write poetry, prose, played the flute like an angel, loved animals. We've always had cats, but she was accomplished at riding horses and intended to get back to that after college, but just fun to be with, the whole package. As I said before, landed a job, had a job already lined up. A lot of kids graduate from college, don't have that. She had a job with General Mills lined up in Dresher, Pennsylvania. People still talk about her bright smile, how she walk into a room and, but Jerry, to what you were just saying to me, that she was in her last semester at St. Joseph's when she met this guy. She'd been dating him for around 6 months, and her friends really didn't care for him. They felt that he was difficult. He was manipulative, possessive, controlling. I mean, they just flat out, like some people you meet, they just didn't like him. They tried to avoid him. And 20 days after she graduated from college, when she was breaking up with him, that's when he stabbed her to death in her apartment. That's a quick encapsulation of that sequence.
Unbelievable, horrible. There are no words to describe how horrific this situation must have been for you and your family.
Yeah, still is.
Did you or your wife, Michelle, notice any warning signs that Kristin was experiencing violence or abuse?
We really didn't. And I have to say that we live outside of Baltimore, to the west of Baltimore. And Kristin was in college in Philadelphia, 125 miles away. Of course, we talked with her by phone and we would see her from time to time. But this guy, the subject of this guy really didn't come up all that much. There was this one phone call, though, where Kristin was talking with her mother. And Kristin said, her mother was saying, well, tell me about this and what about this guy kind of stuff. And Kristin said these words. She said, well, it isn't the perfect relationship. And honestly, the conversation really didn't go very much past that. I think my wife interpreted, as I would, that it wasn't going to last. There's not any point in talking about it all that much. Figure they just weren't a very good match. Kristin had a lot of girlfriends that she could rely upon and see. And for her, meeting guys was never a problem. But knowing what we know today, of course, we would have probably handled that differently. We would have said, well, why do you say it's not the perfect relationship? Or maybe we would have said something like, what would be the perfect relationship? And just get her to talk a little bit. And that's really one of the key things as a parent or as a friend, when you hear something that sounds like there may be something about a relationship that's just not quite right. You want to get that person to talk about it. You want them to form those thoughts and tell you more about it. But anyhow, in our case, the opportunity to ask those questions passed with that. That was pretty much it.
Sometimes they're peers, right? Peers see these things emerging. And this, I've shared this with you, Bill, that I was a victim of physical and psychological abuse many years ago. And my friends saw things. Did Kristin's friends see any warning signs?
They actually did. Now, they didn't see them like they saw things and said, wow, this guy in this situation, this relationship is giving off these warning signs. It wasn't like that. I mean, they just saw things that they thought were bothersome about this guy. They saw how he tried to isolate her from them. They just realized that they had little access to her anymore. Rather than go out on double dates or do things like that, it wasn't like that. This guy was pretty much like sweeping her away. And as it turns out, isolation is a classic warning sign. I mean, it's right up there, at the very top practically. A different thing that was also bothersome, and this was actually the night before she graduated, but her friend Felicity from this area here outside of Baltimore came up. She had a boyfriend in the Philadelphia area, but she came up to Philadelphia. So Kristin and her boyfriend went out to eat with Kristin and her boyfriend. So on that occasion, this guy that Kristin was dating asked Kristin's friend Felicity, when Kristin wasn't there, asked Felicity if she would tell Kristin that she really liked him a lot, that Felicity liked him a lot. Felicity thought that was a very strange request and just said something like, look, I just met you less than an hour ago. And she thought that was so weird, and I heard about all that months later after, but that was her one opportunity to meet this guy. And she was off put by this guy immediately, but he had personality traits. Kristin's friends really, in the end, couldn't stand this guy and actually had heard things like she might break up with him. Every time they heard something like that, they got excited, and then maybe it happened a little bit and then it didn't happen, and it was back and forth and all this stuff. But most of his business was centered around control type issues. I mean, he wanted to control everything. And that's really what worried them so much about him. And they just felt like he wasn't good for Kristin, So her previous roommate from college, because she had an apartment by herself at the time this happened to her, but her roommate for the last 2 years in college and some other friends considered doing an intervention with Kristin on one particular weekend. But as it turns out, the Friday of that weekend, which was Friday, June 3rd, 2005, she was killed. So even with the best of intentions, they honestly, they didn't get there fast enough.
So terrible.
Yeah.
What actions, based upon what you now understand, what actions do you wish they had taken?
Oh, that's a great question. Back in 2005, none of us knew that much about dating violence. I'd never heard that term before. I had never heard the term intimate partner violence before. I knew what domestic violence was in the most general terms, but they had spoken with Kristin about this man, and they felt that she needed to get some space. And around the time she was killed, it was clear she also had arrived at that place. In fact, in an email to me, in her really last few hours, she opened up about him and said that I really use that phrase. I really need to get some space from this guy. But she had gotten there too. But it was clear that she was in the midst of trying to break up with him. And I mean, she took back a security card that he had that would let him into the building. She took back his key. She told a couple of friends that day that I'm done with this guy. But in terms of what I wish they had done, way too late. I wish they had thought to seek counseling from maybe a domestic violence agency, although nobody sees what happened coming. I mean, come on. they probably didn't think any of it in terms of domestic abuse or dating abuse or violence and that type of thing. Maybe if they had gone online and Googled a little bit, maybe they would have found some advice that could have pointed them in a certain direction. Maybe they would have found information that would have pointed out that if this, and this are happening, this is potential danger ahead. But anyway, we know more about how to spot the warning signs now. And, no matter what, if one of our visitors feels there is something that bothers them, people who are watching this now, I would say to them, if you think that there's something about a relationship that doesn't feel right, you have to do something. You have to take some kind of an action. You can't look at it like, wow, I don't like what's going on here. I don't know what to do. Or I see what's going on, but I don't really want to insert myself. It's not my relationship. You have to imagine the worst that could happen, and you have to do something, and you have to act pretty promptly. You have to, we'll talk, I'm sure, tonight about where to turn, but you have to do something.
And that's why we're here tonight, because education is so important. Sometimes it's really embarrassing, or you may feel that you are endangering your own life if you share your story or if you intercede. But it's really important. You need to be empowered with knowledge. And so I'm so grateful. We are so grateful to have you here this evening to share this powerful story, this tragic story of what happened to your daughter. But in the face of that tragedy, you've proactively campaigned to educate the community about the epidemic. And it is an epidemic of dating violence, intimate partner violence.
It is.
And in your book, When Dating Hurts, which is, by the way, a great resource. I've read it. And just in case anybody was wondering, I actually have my copy here. I actually read the galleys while Bill was in the process of putting the book together. Bill, what can the reader learn by reading your book? And I guess the second part of that question is, to whom do you recommend this book?
Oh, these are great questions. Yeah, I definitely had people in mind when I wrote the book, but I think maybe the best framework about dating violence to begin with, the best description, let me say, that I've ever seen or read about dating violence is this one. The dating violence is a widespread epidemic of pain and suffering that leads to a lifetime of broken dreams. And I could not have written that better. Let me say it again. Dating violence is a widespread epidemic. That means there's a lot of it, and it's bad. A widespread epidemic of pain and suffering that leads to a lifetime of broken dreams. Me, my family, Kristin's friends are living with a lifetime of broken dreams. I mean, as I speak to you, this happened in 2015, which for a lot of you is a very long time ago. We relived 2005. If I said 2015, I meant 2005. We relive that every day in this house, every day. I mean, every time you walk past a picture. But it was written to tell what happened to our daughter and what our family's been through since this happened in June of 2005. It's detailed very carefully. I took a lot of notes back in those days, never figuring to write a book, but the very first year was all about a murder case and winding up in a courtroom at some point in time. So I wanted to learn what all the terminology for all the different steps, all of that, because you never know what you need. But I wanted readers to know what it's like to lose a precious family member in this way, especially one who could have been saved under different circumstances. And I hope that readers will see the realities of dating violence and the consequences of not being aware, of not being informed about what this is about and maybe how to spot it and hold it off. But dating violence is not something that happens far from where you live. I used to think that. I thought domestic violence happened in some rough part of town or some depressed area, maybe certain, ethnic groups or something like that. I mean, all these ridiculous stereotypes, as it turns out. I was completely wrong. I had it completely wrong. And I think most people do. You think it happens far from where you live. The truth is it happens equally everywhere. Happens everywhere. Happens where you live, happens around where you work, where I live, happens everywhere. Here's the one fact, Jerry Ann, that I talk about. A lot of times I'll go and I'll see someone speak or I'll pick up the book and it's loaded up with all these facts. And after a while, they just kind of like, you kind of glaze over. But the only fact that I ever use is this one to underscore the epidemic part. That 1 in 3 women will suffer serious physical violence at the hands of an intimate partner at some point in their lifetime. It's 1 in 3. And it typically happens between the ages of 16 and 24, but it can happen to any woman at any point in their life. I've talked with 12-year-olds who've had horrible dating abuse situations. They're freshmen in high school. I talked with women in their 60s who've come off of horrible marriage situations, and even some of them even in dating situations. But when you think of all the women you think 33% of them are physically harmed by someone they thought they were in love with. That's a lot of women, and it's really scary, and it's unimaginable. I want readers to think when they read it, I'd never want this to happen to my friends or to my family or really even to myself. So I wrote this book because I was hoping readers would do all they can so it doesn't happen to them. And I've also included the steps that could be taken so it doesn't happen. I believe your second part of your question was, who did I have in mind when the book was written? But primarily it was parents with children who were in or entering high school or college. Secondarily, I was thinking of school teachers and administrators, of principals in schools. People who hear this going on, maybe see this going on right at school, because a lot of it happens at school. And then also the young men and women from ages 14 and up who it was written so anybody could read this, but people who were right there, who are right in that bullseye of when these things tend to get started. Because sooner or later, when you know that statistic, dating violence will happen to someone they know. It may not happen to them, may happen to one of their friends on the other hand, may happen to a cousin. They may pick up on a piece of information, when some family gathering, their cousin starts talking about some guy. But knowing what to do can be the difference between life and death. I just say to people, keep the 33% number in mind, because this book and efforts like you at FemmePharma, what I'm trying to do, what you're trying to do, we're trying to dial that number down.
So the cycle of abuse can start pretty early. We did have a question that came in, and we will get to our questions later on for those that are comfortable posting their questions. Mm-hmm. But it can start pretty early on. But one of our questions was concerning the age at which one should begin to educate their child, in this case, about issues regarding dating violence. It sounds like, Bill, that when they enter that age where dating becomes a possibility, or when they are confronted with the choice to date someone or to become involved with a member of the same sex or the opposite sex, right?
Yeah, I think that really is the answer. When this first happened, I was concentrating on college kids. And then pretty quickly, from talking with the prosecutor and some other people around that time, they said, no. You don't want to just put your focus on college kids. You got to go to high school kids. So I was kind of then dialing it to high school kids. And then it was like, no, you got to go a little younger than that. You got to go a little younger than that. So I think your answer is the one that I would use now, which is that if there's the possibility of somebody dating, or doesn't really have to be like formalized dating, just sort of boyfriend, girlfriend kind of understandings, that's when this can get started. Absolutely. Yeah,
So we just had a comment come in from Victim's Voice. I'm hoping that's Sherry Kirkendall, and her vote is for elementary school. Sherry, that sounds like it's probably not too early. And Sherry would know, as she's one of the experts. She's a resource, and we'll have those the names of those organizations posted on our website later on. But thank you for that, Sherry. Abuse can be both physical and psychological. We often see the physical signs of abuse, although because we tend to be embarrassed if we're in these types of intimate partner relationships where there is physical violence, we're really masterful at concealing those things with long sleeves and with makeup, etc. The psychological scars and the psychological abuse can often be worse, right? And there are probably some red flags. Can you share some of those with us, Bill?
Yeah, what I should do maybe is just kind of walk through what some people kind of refer to as the classic warning signs. But listening to them, you'll start to pick up on a pattern. But I'll tell you where the pattern goes up front is that every one of the warning signs fits under one big umbrella, and it's all about the power and control of one person having power and control over another person in an intimate partner relationship. So they're supposed to be in love, let's say, whether they think they are or not. They're supposed to be in love. It's supposed to be this, you would think, romantic thing that's taken place. But you'll see when I start to walk through some of these that it doesn't feel like that. But these people are supposed to be in love. They think they are. Some of the classic warning signs are control or dominant behavior, which we've kind of already covered from that standpoint. But it's really one person who doesn't want that 50-50 relationship. They want to control absolutely everything. And I mean all day long. They want every decision to come down to him or her. Typically, it's a him situation. Guys tend to have the higher numbers of being the abusive partner, but it could be either way. And by the way, I should make the comment, this isn't all heterosexual relationships. This could be homosexual relationships. This could be, you hear of every possibility these days more and more. This is all over every one of those relationships. I've talked with people who have been on the giving and receiving end of this behavior. But right at the top is always controlling or dominant behavior. Another one is extreme jealousy or possessiveness, and Kristin fell prey to that. So that kind of gets in there too with the isolation idea. Somebody who is so jealous of any time you spend with absolutely anybody. Doesn't want you talking to those guys, doesn't really want you talking with your girlfriends, doesn't really want you hanging out with your family. I know of guys who've turned the girlfriends off to even their house pets because it's all about me. So extreme jealousy or possessiveness. Constant put downs, that's another tool. Somebody who comes up with some rude nickname for his girlfriend, let's say. Somebody who's always saying, geez, thinking about losing some weight there. And if that person loses weight, might come back and say, wow, looks like you're looking a lot better. Are you seeing somebody else? Somebody who keeps playing with your mind like that with constant put down. Somebody who isolates you, as I said, is right on the list, isolating you from family and friends. Someone who maybe checks your cell phone when you're away from it, or checks into your email when you're not there, or maybe looks at your text messages without having your permission. That's somebody you really have to be concerned about. That person snooping around like that and wanting to know. That's another control thing. Someone who's checking up on you constantly via text messages and calls. That's something this guy was famous for. Kristin would be with somebody else, but it was like he had to kind of insert himself into absolutely every interaction. Somebody who maybe makes you feel nobody else would ever want you. Belittling you to the point where you get to the place where you feel like, wow, at least I have this guy because this guy has made me feel like my self-esteem is so low. I mean, this is like, I'm practically a charity case. Thank God for this guy. Somebody makes you feel you can't do anything right. This is also, some people refer to it as gaslighting. But I had a cousin's daughter who was married to a guy, and they had 3 lovely boys. But in the meantime, this guy had such a gaslighting campaign going on, just every possible way of keeping her off balance. She'd put out the dishes and things like that in the evening and vitamins and all that. And he might go downstairs, she found out later, go downstairs and rearrange where things are and put vitamins back in their jars and things like that. So she'd come down and say, I laid all this stuff out. And he's like, well, it's pretty obvious you didn't. Somebody constantly telling you what to do, of course, is right there with power and control. Someone preventing you from doing what you want to do. If you like to ride horses or if you'd like to play tennis, this person's going to tell you that that's stupid and it costs too much and you shouldn't be doing that, and just really trying to change you. Last, I just end up with lying about practically everything. Someone who lies about everything, setting you up in a world where you feel like you never know when the truth is there or when it's a lie. Each one is manipulation. And why is that? It's just to gain power and control, Jerry. I mean, that's where the classic warning signs, they all stem from that one place.
Right, keeping you off balance. So I wish I had some of these knowledge of some of these warning signs myself. I could check off the list, and there are at least 10 that I was able to tick off during this conversation alone. So thank you for sharing that. Now, this comes down to when you recognize that you are with someone who could be pretty obvious to you. You know, you're getting physically harmed. You may realize after thinking about some of the warning signs that you shared, or perhaps some friends have shared with you, that you're in an unhealthy relationship. How do you end this safely? If you're walking on eggshells, this is a comment from Sherry Kurdakal. If you feel like you're walking on eggshells all the time, that's not a healthy relationship. And the question is, when you recognize that and you know it's time to go, how do you end the relationship safely?
That's a great question. It's an obvious question. One thing I want to say before I answer that is that if you know of somebody, if it's your child, if it's your friend, if it's your neighbor, if it's somebody you work with, and you wish that relationship was over, you can wish all you want, but that relationship won't end until the person being abused wants it to end. And that's it. I mean, that's the rule. That's the law with this thing. That person has to want out. Now, what you're talking about is that person wants out. Okay. What's so tough about this is that the fact that it's such a power control relationship based upon one person doing this to another, that breaking up or ending this relationship is an unhealthy relationship is and can be the most dangerous time. I mean, it's really dangerous because it has to be treated with care. And that's when people get hurt. Sometimes people get killed. My daughter got killed under those circumstances. These unhealthy relationships are unhealthy because they're complicated and they're very involved. If you're dealing with someone who is controlling and abusive, you have to expect this person's not going to give up easily. I mean, they're not going to just let go of the person they're abusing. The whole idea of being so controlling, being the one who makes all the decisions, that person isn't going to say, wow, okay, in their mind, I've made all the decisions up to now, but us breaking up, yeah, you can make that decision. You know, I'll just get my keys and leave. Not going to happen. Breaking up with a controlling individual is the clearest sign to the abusive person that this control or power is about to be broken. You can't expect that person to accept it and move on. Trying to leave a person like this has to be handled extremely carefully. And I always tell people, you know, no matter what you know right now, whether you are that person being abused and you want out, or you are helping that person get out, whatever you know right now, you don't know enough. I guarantee you don't know enough, and you're not prepared for how to get out of a relationship like this. Of course you're unhappy. Let's say it's your daughter. Of course you're unhappy that's your daughter. She's in an unhealthy relationship. You want her out right now. You don't want another minute to pass. You want her to get out that night. That's it. It's not that easy. You have to take your time a little bit. You have to become prepared. And I strongly suggest that the best way to do this is get in touch with a domestic violence counselor. I mean, this is a must. This isn't a nice to have thing. This is a must. You have to get good, experienced information and advice from these people. These people, Jerry, these people are trained. They're ready. And, you know, many of them have actually been there themselves, or have lost family members, or have had family members abused. So they're very practiced in this. And the guy doesn't want to let go in this scenario that I'm talking about. But my daughter was smart. She was loving. She was kind. She was thoughtful. But I'll tell you, she wasn't ready for what was about to happen. She didn't have a plan. You know, she tried to do this alone in her apartment. I guess she thought that was the honorable thing to do. A lot of people would do that. You know, don't want to be around a lot of people, break up, you know, and like maybe he'll just kind of understand. Everything went wrong. Yep.
Leaving is the most dangerous time.
Yeah. Let me finish with one other part because I think it's really important. You know, some people have that plan. They get that advice. They do everything by the book, you know, by the domestic violence book, by the playbook. They got it all figured out. And what happens is this person, this abuser says, look, Can I see you one more time? I mean, I know it's over, but we had a really nice thing going. This was romantic. We had great times, didn't we? Can I see you one more last time? Can I? The answer is no. There are people buried in graveyards right now who saw that guy one more time. I've met people who saw that guy one more time, and they paid for it big time. They survived, but they were severely injured. I've met these people, and it's just so sad. They just saw that guy one more time. Meet me in the Target parking lot. Can't we just sit there and talk in the car? And he gets in the car and he has a gun. And this woman was fortunate after a lot of time in the hospital to get out. So when it's over, it's over. I mean, you have to, in effect, get out of town. You just do. No phone calls, no nothing.
Well, we're looking at Valentine's Day coming up this weekend. And I've heard you use this phrase, fear is the opposite of love.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I'd like to think that I was the one that came up with that, but it's something I spotted somewhere. And it's just one of those things you thought, wow, it's so short and sweet, so simple, and it makes so much sense. What I tell people is everyone deserves a healthy relationship, safe from violence and fear. Protect yourself and your loved ones from an abusive situation by learning the warning signs. But you also have to understand that love is the absence of fear. People I've met who were dating or in married relationships with abusive partners have told me that they always felt some level of fear with these people. That person would come in the room, they'd change. That person would leave, get in his car and drive away. They were different. And their friends would see that in them. They thought they loved that other person, but there was always some backdrop of being afraid of that person, of what that person might do. So fear and love can't exist together. And fear is the opposite of love. It just is. You don't tend to be afraid of people that you love you and you love. You just don't. I mean, it's the opposite. It's totally different.
And yet there are situations where the perpetrator, we'll call them the perpetrator, the one that's doing the abusing,
right,
will say, I can't live without you. And if you leave me, I will take my life. And that's a pretty powerful statement. And for a person who's kind and generous and who has hung in there with their abuser, they can feel trapped. What should you do if that happens?
I've had conversations with people who know a lot more about this subject than I do. And I put that out there. I have a couple of thoughts. One of them was on the list of powerful warning signs of those power and control techniques that some people use. That one's under the heading of most powerful. I mean, that's one where the other person says, well, I don't want that to happen. So I guess I have to stay in this invisible jail cell with this person. So my answer goes like this, and I want to preface it by saying this is my answer. And I'm not, giving you the answer that you might receive from a professional who has handled this dire situation multiple times. But I've thought about it, and I kind of formulated my thought about it. Then I was faced with a situation a year ago, exactly 1 year ago. It was really almost to the day, where a friend of mine called me, and he was in a real panic. And this is a guy who's usually on top of everything. But he was like a whole different guy on the phone. And he said that his high school senior daughter was friendly with the boy in some of her classes in high school. They're both seniors. And she thought it was just friendly. And the boy thought their relationship was many times more serious than she did. He thought they were boyfriend and girlfriend, and he thought that, once we graduate, we're going to be in touch and all these other things. And we're going to ride off into the sunset here. It's going to be great. Now, they had gone to a few school events like dances, things like that together. But, I mean, she wasn't serious about him. She didn't think they were in love at all. They're just sort of cordial. It's just nice. Anyhow, my friend said his daughter told this boy they weren't boyfriend and girlfriend and said it nicely, but he didn't take it well. Anyhow, this kind of went back and forth over a few days in school, again, about a year ago. He eventually told her that if they were not boyfriend and girlfriend, that he thought he might just kill himself. So anyhow, here that same day that this was said, this guy's calling me up, what should he do? And this is my advice to him. It may seem a little harsh, I have to preface, but the young woman needed to understand that her sole responsibility was to herself, and that this young man's sole responsibility was to himself only. Therefore, she was not responsible for his actions. And I told this father a few other things. One of them, of course, is get in touch. As soon as we get off the phone here, get in touch with a domestic violence agency and talk about this and really get professional help from somebody who's a counselor who knows more about these things. My thought was I couldn't help but think back to my daughter. And I just thought, when somebody plays that card, that's also somebody who has thought about maybe taking that other person with him. And that was my concern. And I thought, I'm sorry. I'm pulling for her in this story. But anyway, first get to a DV counselor, domestic violence. First thing in the morning, get to the school counselors, the principal, the administration, whoever they've got there. Alert them to what's going on. Secondly, these two students have to be separated as much as possible. They can't be sitting in the same class. Every chance he gets, he's trying to talk to her. I also said she has to maintain zero contact, no conversations. I'm not allowed to speak with you, is what she has to say. And if he approaches her, she has to move on. Other people, teachers have to know this is going on. So if she's acting strangely or has to get up and leave the class, they'll understand. No contact, no messages from him. She has to tell her friends, no messages from him. Probably sounds pretty harsh, but these circumstances are extremely dangerous. He said he might kill himself. You don't know what he's going to do. Kind of like one of those things, too, where it's like, well, if I can't have you, maybe nobody can. And that's what a lot of people felt happened with in my daughter's situation, that she was breaking up and it's like, well, no one else is going to have you and that's it. So the bottom line for me is I'm what's best for the victims. And I probably never change on that. That's my immediate focus. It always will be. And honestly, in that situation, by the way, nobody actually wound up getting hurt. And she did graduate from high school as he did. She's going off to college. I don't really know too much about what happened with him. But it was a ticking time bomb right there. And, to me, it's pretty clear.
And if you really think that someone is in danger, obviously seek help through a suicide hotline, because obviously you don't want to disregard those types of comments. So there are suicide hotlines. We want to be respectful to those individuals that are suffering from major depressive disorder for whom this could mean something more serious. So you want to be sure to do that. Where can those that are in relationships turn for help? I know you've mentioned some of those organizations, and again, we'll have a list of those supporting organizations on our website. We have many of them tuning in this evening. Where would you recommend that individuals turn for help?
Well, the first thing I would say is turn to local domestic violence agencies. The great thing about that is they will take your call night and day, 24/7, forever. The other thing is that then also maybe gives you the opportunity to get over there and talk with them. So you can call an 800 line, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But with these agencies, again, they have trained counselors who know what they're doing. They're available. Great advice. I've called up and just chatted with them. Once they got through the early protocol questions, and I just talked with them about how does your decision tree work and some things like that, because I felt like I needed to be familiar with that. There's also, if everything else is inconvenient somehow, there are these domestic violence hotlines. The one that's most famous is the one that's called the Domestic Violence Hotline. The number is 800-799-SAFE. Again, 800-799-SAFE. And if you don't feel like figuring that out, it's 799-7233. But of course, you also, as much as you can, because everybody's friends and parents and family are different, but as much as you can, turn to your friends and your family for support. You want them to, if you feel comfortable with it, everybody feels differently, but You want them to know what's going on, because, this person who you're trying to avoid now could show up at the front door. They need to know that this is not good. This is not the plan here, that type of thing.
Bill, we're getting a number of questions, both mostly anonymous questions. And I want to remind those that are viewing in that you can send us your questions anonymously. There is a Google form in the comments on our Facebook page and also in our Instagram bio. But we are getting some questions, so perhaps we could go to some of the questions and then we'll wrap up, because I see that we're at 6:45 and we have folks that probably want to eat dinner if they're on the East Coast, and maybe in the middle of their day if they're in other places. But perhaps we should look at some of the questions. I think that one of the first questions that came in was about the age, which we covered, the age at which one should communicate information about intimate partner violence. Question number 2 came in from an individual who says, my friend is in a relationship with a man who formerly went to jail for physically abusing his ex. He hasn't physically abused my friend, but his manipulation and emotional abuse is clear. How do I talk to my friend without alienating her or feeling like she can't talk to me about her boy troubles? I'm worried the abuse will escalate, but whenever I bring it up, she brushes it off because it was in his past, and he claims that his ex was also abusive towards him.
Yeah, unfortunately, somebody who has a past like that has to be considered to be a dangerous person. He may be holding back on that type of thing, but they have to be considered that, and one of the things about dealing with a friend is really important is, to begin with, is that if you're that bystander, if you are that friend, the first thing I'd say is you should pick up the phone and you should call a domestic violence hotline and get good advice on how to handle your friend. What they're going to tell you, they're going to want you to go through and understand the warning signs, but they're also going to say what being a really good friend is. Mostly being a really good friend is being a great listener. Why I say that is that you're going to want to say to your friend, look, you need to get out of this relationship. He's going to hurt you. And you're going to want to pounce on your friend and judge the situation. Again, you probably don't know enough about what to say and what to do. And I know that you're trying to exhibit how you feel. But getting on your friend to get out of that relationship probably will accidentally drive that person back to the person who was actually driving back to the abuser. Or your friend can say, wow, my friend Jane, she really feels like, you're bad news and I should break up with you. Well, now he's on full alert and he's going to make sure you're not around very much. It's going to make it really inconvenient because you're bad mouthing him, so to speak. So there's a lot there. But what you mostly want to do as a great friend is get your friend to talk about the relationship. If you have a sense of the warning signs, get your friend to talk. You might hear your friend and say, wow, that kind of sounds like this thing in this brochure right here. Maybe you should read it when you're not around him sometime. But you want to help feed your friend good information. Go back to what I said earlier. Your friend has to arrive at that place on her own. Unfortunately, it's a lot like alcoholism. Alcoholics and drug addicts won't stop until they bottom out, until they get to that place where they feel like, I can't and I won't do this anymore. Until your friend says, I can't do this, I can't have this person in my life anymore, your friend will continue that relationship. So you just want to feed that, but you can't make it happen. You can't wish it away or anything like that. So, I fear for your friend too. I really do. I don't think it's going to get better. This type of unfortunate behavior, unhealthy behavior, tends to escalate. So more and more of it starts showing up. Escalate means it shows up more frequently. It shows up more strongly. It gets worse. It tends to get worse. This may be the one exception, but really, I wouldn't count on it.
There was another question that came in, and it is an anonymous question. There's so much more information available now than there was 15 years ago. Do you think the warning signs have changed? Or if young people are still missing the signs, why do you think this is?
Well, do I think the warning signs have changed? No, I don't think they've changed at all. I think that things like technology have technology has made it easier for all of us to communicate, but that means that people who use it in unhealthy ways have other ways now to keep track of other people. That wasn't text messages have only been around for about 16 years now. So years before that, there were other ways to maybe do it, but these kind of electronic leashes are coming out all the time. They're completely immediate. It used to be call me when you get there. Now it's I can call you anytime I want. I don't think they've changed. I don't think they've changed at all in a general way. Specifically, yes, of course they have with technology, that type of thing. I'm trying to remember the back half of that question. What was that? Do you recall? I'm sorry.
Why do you think the warning signs have changed? Or if young people are still missing the signs, why do you think they are missing the signs?
Well, I don't know that they know the signs. So I think that's it's an innocent thing. I think that these have to be told to people. These have to be taught to people. These have to be in classrooms, or maybe parents talk to their kids about this type of thing. They have to become acquainted so that when something happens, they go, whoa, that sounds like what mom was talking about, or that sounds like what somebody in my class was talking about, that type of thing. I think it's a matter we all have to wake up to the prevalence of this. We have to take it seriously, and we have to bring awareness about it, and we have to educate about it. All those things have to line up.
Another question, which you'll really appreciate, Bill, where can we purchase your book that lets you keep the most proceeds?
I'm going to have a table down on the corner here in a couple minutes. And you can just
He's in Howard County, Maryland. So if you're not in Howard County, that might be quite a trip for you.
Well, the proceeds part is nice. You can buy it as an ebook or a paperback on Amazon. And that's actually the only place you can get it. I published through them. I self-published because I didn't want to wait forever to get an agent and to get a publisher and do all that. And then also be told how to change my book or to sensationalize things I didn't want to. So, but honestly, it's not about royalties and things like that, which, by the way, aren't that much. I will tell you. I'm not going to give you a number, but I will tell you, unless you're Barack Obama, I'm not. He's probably making some money on his book, but I didn't set out to do that. I wanted a lot of books to get sold because I know that puts a lot of books in people's hands, and that people tend to read a book. And if they like the book or they get a lot out of it, they'll pass it around. That's the idea. So one book can influence a whole lot of people, but I'm not worried about the proceeds. Thanks.
No, but
thanks for thinking of me.
It's time for that individual to care about you.
Hey.
Parents, teachers, and young adults can read When Dating Hurts, and they obviously will benefit from what you learned, sadly, through what tragically happened to you and your family and to your beautiful daughter, Kristin. And I know that you do many other things. I don't know how many times you have shared this story, but perhaps you can share with us what you have done to empower individuals with knowledge.
What do you mean, techniques? You mean I've done? Is that what you mean? Well, I mean, mostly it's been presentations or speeches over the years, and interviews and things like that. I've given well over 100 now, and so that's that. We had a foundation for about a dozen years. Two of Kristin's friends initiated that, thank God. I don't know if my wife and I would have done that on our own. I mean that sincerely. So we helped to run it after a while, but that was great. We had run walks, had hundreds of people show up, and they all then had the opportunity to be influenced. In the last year, the book came out. The book's 320 pages, but it reads like a novel, although it's all true. And I mean that reads like a novel because it's not some boohoo piece about feel sorry for me and the Mitchell family. It's really, you'll see very quickly that it is a page turner. It was written with energy. And that was so that you would get through it and that you would get to the back part of the book, which gives you all the warning signs and things like that. And then the latest technique to get the word out is the When Dating Hurts podcast, which you can get through any podcast player. Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify. There's one called Overcast. There's a whole bunch of them. I've got 8, just in the last month, I've put up 8 episodes. I'll be doing more. And some of the people who I'm interviewing are people who actually are in the book. I've got the first detective I spoke with, and I've got other survivors. I've got mothers of survivors, and I've got Beth Sturman, who's the director of Laurel House, is in there. I'm going to have other directors of Montgomery County Women's Center and probably other ones, like the Dating Violence Center of Chester County. I'm hoping to get her on. And but all these things are good, and they're sent up in a way that I think that are vast, not just interesting because of the subject matter, but these are interesting people who know a lot. And what could be more interesting than your kids' lives, or the life of your best friend or your own life? What could be more interesting than having a safe life? Because 1 in 3 women, that statistic is real, and that's physically violent. There's twice that number is emotional violence, emotional abuse. So it doesn't paint a very good picture, but there are things you can do to get out of harm's way.
There was a question that also just popped up. It was an anonymous question. I don't know if we can put that up again. There was an individual who was involved in a relationship. I believe I'm recalling the question, but do we have the ability to put that back up? So the question was, how do you convince someone experiencing abuse that it's not just annoying, but part of a crime?
How do you convince someone that it's part of a crime? Well, what's missing in that is I don't know what was actually happening. I wouldn't say that abuse is always a crime to begin with. It's not always a crime. It can be if it gets bad enough, if it gets physical and that type of thing. But it's one of the things that is very hard to, besides physical abuse, but one thing that's very hard to prove is emotional abuse. And the woman who founded an organization called Victim's Voice is listening in and doing this with us tonight. She's one of our sponsors. And so, but she has put a great effort into that. She has an app called Victim's Voice where people can go on, it holds up in a courtroom, but people can go on and they can, in effect, through words, they can record what has happened to them, emotional abuse, physical abuse, and it will hold up in a court of law, whether it's a marital relationship or not. It's a brilliant idea. It works really well. It's been out now for, I believe, the better part of 2 years. But, it's not always a crime. It's a shame, but it's not always a crime.
Do we have any other questions coming in from our audience? How do you break away from a man who claims I have showed him interest, and when I discourage him, he cries?
Well, I hate to say, it's kind of another form of manipulation, but how do you break away from a man that does that? I think you just, as best you can, you have to take yourself out of circulation. I mean, again, I don't know the circumstances. Might be somebody you work with, or I don't know, but you have to make yourself unavailable. And I think you have to stick to your guns about that. I think you have to communicate that if you really want out of it, this relationship is done. And, it's not coming back, and I'm really sorry, you feel that way, but I don't feel the same way. Again, you're responsible for your life. I'm responsible for mine. You make decisions about you. I make decisions about me. If it's a dangerous relationship, then you have to be so careful. You drive a different path to work every day. You avoid that person. You tell your friends, I don't want that person around me. If that person's anywhere around me, let me know so I can clear out, that type of thing. But you have to cut off the water from somebody like that. You have to do it. Sounds harsh and all that, but if it's a relationship you don't want, you have a say in your own life, And
I recall the T-shirt, the Kristin's Crusade, run life your way. And I still wear that. And I've reminded my own daughter about that. So it's really true.
Yeah, we wanted we wanted women specifically, but we wanted people in relationships to feel that they were empowered. It's not about what he wants in specifically what we're talking about tonight. It's not what that power person wants. Run Life Your Way. Plus, it was for a run walk, so it kind of worked a couple ways. But it's still being used. It's still in use today. The Kristen's Crusade name is actually now an initiative of the Cleary Center. It's the Dating Violence Initiative. They took the name, it was our idea to do it. So because it had equity, and then the line "Run Life Your Way," they own it. They own both of those. So I think it's great. Jess Mertz and the group over there, the Cleary Center, Abby, everybody, they embraced that. So it kind of kept it along. But yeah, I've got a stack of T-shirts too. Too many of them.
Well, we've just hit the 7 o'clock hour. And Bill, I want to thank you once again for sharing your story. You are making a difference, and you are saving lives. FemmePharma is committed to safety, health, and empowerment of women. I encourage you to visit our website, www.femmepharma.com, to learn more about our life-changing products. We will be contributing a portion of the proceeds to the many organizations, and we'll list them, and you can choose the one that you want to support. But we'll be contributing a portion of the proceeds from those sales of products to those organizations. And I just want to do a shout out to the major teaching universities in the Philadelphia region who have agreed to support this, and also to the many groups of women who have tuned in, the various organizations that do life-saving work. And thank you once again, Bill Mitchell. When Dating Hurts, I'm Jerry DiPiano, CEO of FemmePharma. I'm signing off. Stay well. Take care. Namaste.
Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate it.